Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Pragmatic Optimists on Legal AF with Midas Touch. We are excited to have you guys join. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share this content if you think it has been helpful or even just a little bit optimistic, or if you feel that you're becoming a praggy yourself. We are excited to bring you some more information with another friend of the pod that we have with immigration. We had a really great conversation last week with Chev Jones from Florida, really understanding what the alligator Alcatraz concentration camp looks like in Florida. But now let's bring in a little bit more optimism to really break down what are some things that we can do every day to understand protecting our neighbors, our friends, and our communities from the abuses that we're also seeing in the court process for people in our country. So Rachel, why don't you help us by welcoming our newest guest and explaining a little bit more how you both know each other?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Tiara. And before I do that, I think even the overarching point that you've made about the Trump administration ignoring judges and ignoring people's rights is something that we're going to get into specific to immigration today, but something that I think we're going to be discussing a lot in the coming days and weeks here on Pragmatic Optimists. And there was actually an article that came out in the Washington Post this morning that did a kind of general qualitative analysis of courts ruling against Donald Trump and the fact that 1 in 3 of those rulings against the Trump administration, there are at least allegations, like I said, it was a pretty high level analysis, that the administration is ignoring that order. And so I think that what we're going to try and talk about today is both what's happening and what people's rights are or are supposed to be in a functioning democracy and court system, and then also some more forms of mutual aid and ground organizing that people can look to get involved. And I am really excited to bring in Gina Starfield, who is a friend of mine from law school, who is a powerful immigration rights advocate. I know her from doing immigration rights work at law school. And at this point, got distracted because I was thinking about how long we've known each other now, which is coming up on 6 years, which is a little bit crazy. But Gina, what have you been doing since graduating from law school, where we were our little Harvard Immigration and Refugee Clinic kind of alignment, and take us from the last time we saw each other in person, which I do think was around graduation, though we've certainly kept in touch to say, oh my God, how are these things happening? And then through today, because I know that you just changed jobs also, and now you're going to be teaching and hopefully starting with us.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rachel. It's so exciting to reconnect in this way. And as you've said, to connect over time when we're seeing different injustices happen. So I, for the past 3 years since law school, had been working at a direct services organization in New York City, working directly with youth ages 12 to 24 primarily, who are undocumented, and I've been representing them in their removal defense proceedings at immigration court, so defending them in deportation proceedings, and also applying for avenues of relief for them and pathways to a green card. So predominantly, that looks like special immigrant juvenile status and asylum for youth nationwide and youth in New York that I have been working really closely with. And I just started about a month ago at an immigration justice law clinic at a law school here in New York. And so I'm now going to be supervising law students and assisting teaching them how to do this work. So it's been really exciting. And I've also been, as you mentioned, involved into some on the ground advocacy and support of communities here in New York. Really over the past 2 months, but certainly forever, New York has been a hotbed of immigration violations and really strong community organizing and advocacy to protect immigrant New Yorkers. So I'm excited to share some of what we've been seeing, both the craziness, dangers, like wild ICE violations, and how the community's been responding.
Thanks so much. And I want to make sure that I should actually probably be saying this on every show, but none of this is legal advice. But given that Gina can talk about a little bit of her experience and expertise, something that I'm trying to be better about as someone who I do think has an above average understanding of immigration law once you hit the courts is we're saying all the time, make sure that you know your rights, And things are evolving so quickly, and the Trump administration is so often seemingly directing ICE to enforce things in a way that is illegal, that I think that many people, myself included, now are questioning what those rights really are. If someone is stopped on the street, or if they are subject to a raid at their employer, or if you are an employer and you have ICE show up and ask to be let in. And so understanding that none of this binds you to anything, could you give us just a high level overview of what people should be thinking about if they are put in a situation where they're interacting with immigrations and customs enforcement?
Absolutely. And as you said, this is not legal advice. Everybody should ideally consult an immigration lawyer if you are particularly worried about your individual circumstances. And a lot of this deals with how comfortable you are, what your inherent risk is in interacting with ICE agents. And it is, a personalized decision when it comes to a potential ICE encounter. I think the first thing I'll say, you should not give any false statements to ICE officials or claim any type of immigration status that you do not have, because that is very dangerous and it could be used against you. So you do not want to lie or present false documents to any official. That being said, everybody has the constitutional right to remain silent when they are encountering ICE. So the first thing that, I don't know if you've seen, red cards that different organizations have put out and disseminated, but it basically breaks down what your constitutional right is to remain silent when you encounter an ICE official on the street, most specifically, but in other areas. And it's really important to assert your right to remain silent. You can say, I am remaining silent. I don't feel comfortable speaking with you. I'm not consenting to a search of my person or my belongings, and really just remain silent and ask if you're free to leave. And ideally, in that scenario, you would be able to exit safely, although we do know that ICE escalates things. And at a high level too, there are different rights depending on what setting you're in. So if you're in your home, you have a right to privacy inherent in your home and, kind of the curtilage, the immediate surroundings of your home. And ICE needs a judicial warrant to enter that space. And often they do not have judicial warrants. So you should keep your door closed and ask ICE or whatever agent is outside to identify themselves. And if they have a warrant, to slip the warrant under your drawer so that you can inspect it and make sure that it is signed by a judge. It identifies the person or areas they're looking to search, and it is still active. And more often than not, they won't actually have that document. So we are seeing people being successful in not allowing ICE into their home. And that's really one of the biggest rights that you have is that right to privacy in your home. In the workplace, in places of worship, in state courthouses and federal courthouses, rights are different. And it also really depends on what your city or state has incorporated and what rights you have. So in New York City, we have a lot of extra rights in certain city and public areas. In federal court, in immigration court specifically, your rights are very limited. And ICE put out a new memo, once these sensitive locations were revoked, and ICE could, in fact, arrest people in courthouses or places of worship. They've put out a new memo maybe a couple months ago, I want to say, about arrests in immigration court. And that's actually what we've been seeing very specifically right now. And I can kind of explain a little bit what's been happening at the courts, possibly in your cities.
Thank you so much. I want to turn over to Tiara in one sec for us to kind of go down the path of how we can be involved if we're not attorneys and we also do hold some of the privileges that you kind of alluded to that let us have a higher risk tolerance. Like if you are a natural born citizen in the United States, or if you are, I don't know, like me, the whitest person alive, perhaps, But before we do that, really quickly, I want to follow up on one thread, which was that piece about arrests at courthouses now. And this is something that I have baseline looked into and I keep meaning to talk about on here. So thank you for opening the door. I'm fairly certain that at a number of immigration courts, you can request at least kind of check-in and status hearings be moved to Zoom or digital. Could you let me know how easy that process is? And do you happen to know if that's consistently being granted across the country and what the benefits of that could be?
Absolutely. So, yes, what we are seeing are individuals being arrested by ICE when they go to attend immigration court hearings specifically. And I think it's also important just to highlight this is happening in immigration courts. It's not necessarily happening in your criminal court, family court, other state courts where there might be protections there. So not to alarm folks and disseminate too much fear, but that is happening. And folks have been successful in filing motions for virtual appearances and requesting that the respondent, the non-citizen, appear virtually. And there are some pro se samples going around where you could file a pro se motion to appear virtually, particularly because, as you all know, immigrants don't have right to counsel in immigration court. So the large portion of respondents are pro se and don't have anyone that could represent them and file this motion for them. That being said, at least in New York, we're having mixed results. So some immigration judges will grant these motions. If you have counsel, it's more likely that it will be granted. But we are also seeing immigration judges deny these motions. If someone joins virtually, there are some judges that will tell the individual they have, 3 hours to get to court. And if they don't, they'll be ordered removed in absentia. So it is really, really important to try and consult, local guidance around motions to appear virtually. And if you are able to submit one, you still want to make sure that you are complying and you want to follow up and see what the court orders, because if the court does order you to appear, it's important not to miss that court hearing.
Yeah, thanks for letting us know some of the tools and how effective they are. Again, this is not legal advice, but these are some really great conversations that people can have with their support systems. One thing I've heard on the ground from advocates is to start making a plan. If you are someone who feels vulnerable right now and you are concerned about your family or community safety, the biggest piece of advice, in addition to all of the amazing gems that you've given us today right now, is to start making the plan if you don't have one. And one thing that I can also give a little bit of optimism before we get into what people want to do is states also have a lot of power in these cases. One of my friends who just completed law school last year also came to me with a bill for special immigrant juvenile cases because our family courts in Rhode Island didn't see young people after the age of 18. The federal law allows people up to the age of 21 to access special immigrant juvenile cases. And so we changed our laws in the state of Rhode Island to allow now 18 to 21-year-olds to use this special immigration pathway. So states, if you're listening and you are in a state that does not have access to access to the juvenile courts for people above the age of 18, you can pass a law or encourage your state official to pass a law to increase the age limit to 21 years old as a carve out. It doesn't have to be for every single family court case. We were able to do it in my state, modeled after a bill that was passed in both Connecticut and Massachusetts. And that was not something I came up with on my own. It was something that a friend came to me with and said, I want to make sure that we are using the full extent of the federal law, and you have the power to make that change. We introduced it for the first year this year in Rhode Island, and I am so proud that we passed it in the first year with little fanfare, almost no pushback, like literally the quietest immigration bill that we passed all across the nation, and almost no words about it. So there's a ton of power that you as a regular schmegular person can do simply by deciding to have a coffee chat, a beer, a slice of pizza, or even a quick phone call conversation with your elected officials. That is one case study where introduced 1 year, I found out about it last May, and it was made state law this June. So thanks for mentioning that, because it reminded me that there is so much hope as long as you are willing to put that hope into action. But I would love to ask, what are other things that people who are in safer positions — Rachel said she is the whitest person ever. I will say that I am also pretty comfortably being a Black American, though we know that there are tons of other immigrants, especially from the Caribbean, who are darker skinned, who are also being targeted. So what can safe Americans do to help our immigrant communities and to either participate in court watch? What does it look like to be a bystander witnessing what is happening when someone's being detained by ICE? How far away should you be from an agent? Are you allowed to record? Are you allowed to have your face covered? What does it look like to stand between a person in the courthouse and an immigrant neighbor or friend and protect them from detaining? So that was a lot of questions, but please, we're all know, I think, what
Perfect.
can we all do?
No, thank you so much for these questions. And I, as a person who's primarily practiced for SIJ, special immigrant juvenile status, it's just an incredible story. So thank you for sharing that huge avenue of relief for tons and tons of children in this country. So first and foremost, you do have the right to record ICE agents from, a safe distance. You don't want to obstruct their procedures, but you do have the right to record them. That can change depending on your setting. So, for example, you cannot record in immigration court or federal court. So you cannot record those hearings, but you can attend as an observer. It is open court. Some judges are refusing to allow court watchers or ICE watchers into their courtrooms. And they have a lot of discretion to do that. But you do have the right to be there, and you can assert that right. And you do have the right to wait outside the courtroom or wait outside the courthouse. And at least in New York, but I know, Rachel and I were just chatting, I know in several cities across the US, there are organizations, there are community organizers that are arranging court watch, like you said. In New York, I participated with 2 organizations that are arranging on the ground court watch and support. And it can look like a variety of things. Sometimes it looks like going outside the courthouse early in the morning and handing people know your rights flyers about what might happen in court that day as they're lining up to enter the courthouse and attend their hearings or attend their ICE check-ins, which also happen at several immigration courts or ICE offices. And we have people outside different ICE buildings, outside all the immigration courts in New York, handing out those flyers. And, one of the main things that they say is if ICE officials, ICE lawyers, when you reach the court, are trying to dismiss your case, you should push back against dismissal. You want to maintain your right to seek relief against deportation. If you have an open asylum case, dismissal might affect your case, and it would lead into your asylum claim being dismissed. And you want to assert fear. If you have a fear of returning to your home country, it's really important that you tell that to the judge, and it's really important that you tell that to an ICE agent in the event that you are picked up. So we have people who are sharing that material to individuals waiting in line as they're waiting to go into their courthouse hearing. And then we also have folks outside the actual judge's room to escort people outside of their hearings. So you might have heard that often we're seeing people being arrested by ICE as they exit the courtroom from their immigration hearing and exit the building or just even walk out of the courtroom, like I said. So we have people who are escorts who are walking from someone's hearing, especially if they know that an individual is maybe at a heightened risk from other organizations or just being connected to this space. We'll try and find people who can accompany them. And that's called ICE accompaniment in New York and probably in many different cities. And then we're also having people just watch in the courtroom and document this to see what judges are, allowing observers, what judges are dismissing cases. Is ICE picking up people even when their case isn't dismissed. So I have heard of several instances now where ICE is detaining an individual, even though the judge sets them up for another master calendar hearing, another hearing in their case, or an individual hearing to seek asylum in a year's time. There have been cases where ICE is still detaining those individuals and arresting them, I think unlawfully. And in even some cases, we have heard where they are then, if the judge has denied a motion to dismiss in New York, for example, ICE is arresting an individual, bringing them to a different state, then filing a motion to change venue, and if venue is changed, trying to seek dismissal in another state's immigration court. There have been successful challenges and an interlocutory appeal of that motion to change venue, at least in one case. But it's just something that is happening. I think as an immigrant advocate on the ground, ICE strategy is really chaotic. Maybe that's part of their game plan, likely to create chaos and create fear. And it changes moment to moment. So immigrant advocates are responding as fast as possible to this moment. And as things shift, changing their legal strategy, and organizers are changing their court watch, accompaniment, other types of strategies as well.
Yeah, thank you for those hot tips for people listening. Are there any national organizations that you'd recommend for even doing a basic know your rights training or an observer's training? I've done one in my own community. I've seen lots of great information coming out of the ACLU as like a national organization that's leading on a lot of these court cases. But are there any other prominent voices who can, if someone doesn't have access to a training, that they can go to learn what to do in their own communities?
That's great. I think the ACLU is a great resource, and they have local chapters in a variety of states. So looking on your own state or local chapter ACLU website, downloading materials there. Immigrant Defense Project has a ton of Know Your Rights materials, often in a bunch of different languages. There really are tons and tons of resources. ICE Watch is also I believe, national organization. At least I know there's an NYC ICE Watch that is very prominent on Instagram and other social media that is organizing individuals. So, reach out to your community, reach out to organizers that you might know, and do a little research to look for Know Your Rights materials in your specific state. And I think that will probably lead you down the right path.
Thanks so much, Gina. Before we wrap, something that we're doing is asking people to share something that's happened recently that's keeping them hopeful. We are trying to be pragmatic. We're also trying to stay optimistic and hopeful. We're in for a long road, I think. And so I don't know if there's anything specific that you'd like to share that's keeping you hopeful before we close out today.
It's hard. There's not much hope, as you said, but it is really important to hold on to whatever hope we have. And I'll share, I think this is a story that you've seen that was uplifted by lots of folks in New York City. There was a young man, Yasir, who was attending his ICE check-in. He was being represented by the DOOR Legal Services, NYC, and it was almost certain that he was going to be arrested. So many people, so many other legal organizations and lawyers told the attorneys at the DOOR that it was very likely he would be detained. And the team at the DOOR really engaged in a ton of advocacy with JFREG, with others, and they got New York City Comptroller Brad Lander to accompany Yasir to his ICE check-in and accompany him outside. And then there was a little rally and press conference. And Yasir is someone who is eligible for special immigrant juvenile status, like we've talked about. And he wasn't arrested that day. He got to walk out freely. He got to just live in New York City as a young adult, as like a teen being here. And it was a really, really exciting win. So getting electeds to participate in that way, like Brad Lander is someone, as you've seen, if you've been following some of the NYC comptroller accounts or his personal account, he has been putting his body on the line multiple times, accompanying people in immigration court and standing outside the court, standing outside hearings. And that is just something that is so meaningful to see, especially as an immigration practitioner in New York City, to know that at least one elected official is really caring about this issue and caring about immigrant New Yorkers. And if you guys can reach out to elected officials in your city, as Tiara was saying, that's another way that they can get involved. And having an elected on site does scare ICE officials, or, I think shows them that the city is going to stand up and not take this behavior. So it was really an amazing win that day.
Definitely. And I think New York City politics broadly are something that I'm allowing to keep me hopeful for at least a little bit longer. We'll see how things continue to play out. But so are all of the people that are on the ground doing the work, absolute experts like you. Some people we went to law school with keep me hopeful. Some,
yeah. we know those kinds of people.
Yes. So Gina, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of your expertise and no legal advice throughout. I think it's going to be really helpful as people continue to wrap their heads around what the state of immigration is in the United States and parse out between, ICE is doing a lot of different things, but what is it that they're actually allowed to do versus not? So hope to continue to stay in touch. And I know that your students are going to be just unbelievably lucky to have you this coming semester and beyond.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.